We're going to get started in about a minute here as other people come into the Zoom call. Sorry for the delay. A little bit of a technical issue there. So yeah, it's Zoom. You all dealt with it. Good morning. Thanks for all being here. Going to start in about a minute for those of you just coming in.
I hope everybody has their coffee.
Cold.
If you have it, drink it.
How are you, Ryan?
Doing well. How are you, Greg? Good morning.
Morning.
So you got some painting to do.
Well, that's what my son thinks. I'm going to call it a training exercise.
I did some.
I don't
painting.
do ladders anymore. He's got 13-foot ceilings in part of his house, so I won't be going up the ladders.
You have the extended roller thing with the.
Yeah, we talked last night. I said get the following tools. I actually used to manage a paint store many years ago, and so he at least thought I had some advice for him that was useful. Children don't always think.
I did a little bit of house painting in college to make some extra money, and it's a hard job. It's
a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
Well, I think it's about time. It's about a minute. So let's get this show on the road. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining our Education Third House with Senator Greg Walker and Representative Ryan Lauer. We would like to start by thanking our area legislators for agreeing to join us today for the Third House event. Today's Third House, is being hosted by and moderated by the Columbus Educators Association and the Bartholomew County Retired Teachers Association. My name is Alan Birkemeier. I live in Brown County, so I can't vote for either of these guys. And I am an association representative for CEA at Central Middle School in Columbus. I would like to remind viewers that they can submit questions for specific legislators as we go by typing them in the Q&A located at the bottom of the Zoom call, so somewhere down there. We have folks standing by that will choose questions and choose questions for us to read if time allows.
And good morning, everyone. And I'm Lynne Fleming, and I'm the president of BARTA, which is the Bartholomew County Retired Teachers Association. So when you retire, hope you join us. We don't do a lot except for have a lot of fun and eat together. We're excited to be here with our legislators today. First, we're going to give both legislators 1 minute to introduce themselves and speak a little bit about their perspective on the legislative session so far. Sorry. After that, Alan and I will ask a few questions about specific bills and issues that the legislature this year has worked on. At the end of the event, if time allows, we'll take a few questions that were submitted by the public and viewers, and then allow both legislators time for closing statements.
So in order to make sure we get through all the questions and leave time for the Q&A, we're going to ask that legislators keep their response to around 2.5 to 3 minutes. If more than 3 minutes go by, you will hear this sound. Hopefully.
Maybe.
Dakota, we're not hearing the sound. All right, well, we'll work on that. You'll hear some crazy sound. You'll figure it out. But first up, we're going to do introductions. So we'll begin with Representative Lauer, who we first want to thank for voting to fully fund students whose parents chose a virtual option this school year. So thank you for that. And if you go ahead and introduce.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here this morning on a wonderful Saturday. The weather's been nice outside, so I hope everybody's getting a chance to get outside these last couple of days. It's my honor to be able to serve the people of Columbus and Bartholomew County up at the State House and do these kind of events. And I really appreciate our teachers and our educators in the district and really across the state too. I'm talking about our efforts to maintain a responsible, balanced budget in Indiana, and the House just passed a new budget for the biennium. It's a 2-year budget. It's fully balanced and it's fiscally responsible. keeps us on a very solid footing to be able to do the things and make the investments in our priorities. And our main priority in the budget is education. So it's wonderful to be here today. 50% of all of our dollars, our revenue in Indiana in the budget goes to K through 12 education. And I'm looking forward to getting into details about the various bills that are out there, and I think are moving Indiana forward and helping out families and kids and schools and public schools. So I look forward to the discussion. We're investing in Hoosier students and teachers in schools. And we're also wanting to make sure that we're adjusting and making sure that we're doing everything we can to help our citizens, including our schools, during this pandemic to get out of it, to get our economy and rolling again, to get our jobs continuing to grow and improve our economy, and just an all of the above approach to our state government. And it's a pleasure to be here today. I look forward to your questions as well.
Okay, sorry, Lynn just had some technical issues, so I'm picking up for her on the script. So thank you, Representative Lauer. Next, we're going to hear from Senator Walker, who we want to thank for voting against Senate Bill 251, which would eliminate payroll deductions for only teachers' union dues payments. Senator Walker, your introduction.
Thank you, Alan. I'm not a morning person. I hope most of the creases out of sleeping are off my face already, but it's fun to join you here this morning. I've got some new friends on the call. I've got some old friends. Lynn and I go back a long time. She's been harassing me for as long as I can remember. I've been a member of the General Assembly for 15 years. That's too long. We'll see how that goes going forward. But it's again, a couple broad things. Education is important to me as a homeschool dad. We've homeschooled 4 children, and sometimes people cringe when you hear that. I've always been a strong believer in education choice. I don't necessarily agree with the discussions on how those choices are prioritized and what the trade-offs are and should be. With any decision making, there are both positives and negatives. And I'm not so sure that we've got our priorities straight when it comes to how families are to make those decisions and using funding models to try to incentivize choices in the state. I'll just remind everyone, this is the halfway point. So bills that have originated in each chamber are going to get massaged and worked over. Sometimes there's even what we call a strip and insert. So the entire content of a bill that passed one chamber can be removed and new language be inserted in its place. That occurs. It's been done to me on more than one occasion. It happens to bills. And so there's still a lot of room for discussion between differences in viewpoints between the two chambers. And this is a good time to review where those bills are and to plan for that second half discussion. So I appreciate the opportunity to be with you this morning.
Thank you, legislators. Let's start talking about specific bills and issues from this legislative session. First, we're going to talk about House Bill 1005 and Senate Bill 413, both of which have passed out of the Indiana House and Senate, respectively, and would make significant changes to the voucher program. When originally introduced in Indiana, the voucher program was designed specifically to help low-income students attend private schools. Among other things, House Bill 1005 would raise the total private school voucher amount to 90% of per pupil funding, expand eligibility so to middle and upper class families making up to $145,000 to qualify for the private school voucher, and would also create the state's first education savings account program. SB 413 would produce similar, albeit more limited, expansions to the voucher program. Critics of the voucher extension believe that these dollars should be going to public schools. Locally, less than 4% of students utilize a voucher. Legislatures, could you please speak a little to House Bill 1005 and Senate Bill 413? Do you support expanding the voucher program to upper class families? Why or why not? We'll begin with Senator Walker.
Okay. I did vote on Senate Bill 14 in the affirmative, and I was engaging with Terry Spradlin with he's the Superintendent's Association, right? Or is that school boards? I forget which now. Anyway, engaging with Terry, he asked me to vote no, and I explained why I voted yes. It's that first of all, the House proposal is much more expansive than the Senate proposal. The Senate proposal does include a total cap on expenditure of the scholarship program, but essentially, I was hoping to keep the Senate in control of that conversation. The Senate bill is tighter in terms of eligibility on income levels. I don't know. I don't know why we think that 150,000 or 145,000 is the right cutoff. I think is that 300% of free reduced lunch, I believe, is the number I recall. But I did support the bill as a sign that I prefer the discussion to start with the Senate version over the House version. It doesn't mean I'm locked in on each element of that bill as it stands today. I have shared that with the bill author in the Senate, Senator Rotz, that I would be supportive of the bill, but for the reasons I gave. I think I need to know more about, in particular, the voucher expansion in regards to those with disability. I've heard the criticism, and I think there's probably some truth to it, that students with disabilities sometimes pop in and out of public education, and maybe the timing of that may be relative to the ADM count day, and then returning to the public school after monies have been allocated to a private education system. So I'm certainly want to know more about that practice and how prevalent it is. I don't want to get so tight with it that we've got the same scrutiny going in the public education system, where if someone leaves midpoint and goes to the private school, then you have to start accounting for shifting those dollars as well. So I want it to be a fair and equal treatment between the two choices. But that's why that's why I voted yes now, is to keep the conversation more focused on the Senate language instead of the House language.
Thank you, Senator Walker. Next, Representative Lauer.
Yes, you know, the notion of school choice is a policy position, and I'm a strong supporter of the freedom for families to have the most educational options available to them. I'm grateful that here in Bartholomew County we have excellent quality public schools, and that's reflective from the choice that parents and students make to go to our public schools, and I applaud that choice. The House Bill 1005 does expand the eligibility. It brings more choice available to families in the middle class. The number, it depends on how you look at it, but for a family of four, 139,000, so about 140,000 would be the cap. And we can debate whether that's the right number. And we're having that debate. As Senator Walker said, we're halfway through the process. And you know, with a two-family income, you've got a welder and a teacher with 4 children. Right now, if they're making as a household $80,000 total, they're not fully eligible for school choice dollars. And so this expansion adds more middle-class families into the ability to do that. It also equalizes funding for students. So I fully understand that there are people that have legitimate debate and differences about the notion of school choice and to allow it. And I'm very confident that right now, the vast majority of parents and students choose our public schools, and I applaud that. So we worked with 1005 to adjust initially as it went through the process. The fiscal was greatly reduced, actually. So I'm proud to also have supported 600 million new dollars from the amount that was expended last year compared to this year, or you can look at almost 400 million new dollars for our public schools, and I support that. I support that very strongly.
I'm sorry that the sound effect isn't working. I heard it. So just
Well,
watch me. If
let
you see
me
me
add
going-
that the funding for this expansion of school choice is about $60 million compared to $600 million for our public schools. And I believe in all the above approach, where we could have the choices for our families and also support our public schools. And I look forward to more questions about that.
Well, thank you, legislators. And again, sorry for interrupting you there. Next, we're going to turn our attention to the ESA portion of House Bill 1005. ESAs are in simplified vernacular, sort of like an education debit card provided to state to homeschool parents that would allow them to spend state money on things they deem necessary for their child's education. And states that have implemented this type of program before, critics have noted examples of wasteful, non-educational spending. If House HB 1005 passes, how will the state ensure that parents are utilizing ESAs and aren't making frivolous purchases?
Yes, so there are some misconceptions about, and I've seen the talk about debit cards. There's no debit cards in the House proposal for education scholarship accounts. So these education accounts are targeted to some of the most vulnerable in our education system that have traditionally a little more changes at home. These are only eligible for students with disabilities that have an IEP, for active military families that may be moving around a lot, or a parent or home away a lot, and also for foster kids, some of our most challenging situations for children. So no, there are no debit cards in this. So all of the expenses will be managed by our treasurer here in Indiana, and very similar to the education scholarship accounts. And the spending will be fully auditable. And so the viewers here understand what this means. This means that in addition to tuition for students, our disabled students, for instance, have extra educational needs and expenses. So blind students have some specific electronic needs, and Braille textbooks, and or other students, our foster kids, might need some extra tutoring and summer programs, and those kind of things would be also available for funding. And there's a very strict regimen for the providers. So you have to be an approved provider for education and approved through the Indiana's treasurer. And it's not a they can buy whatever they want and do whatever they want. It's actually very tightly controlled financial funding mechanism, and it just gives kids that are vulnerable in our education system more flexibility if they choose. And again, this is an ability for them to have more options available. for their educational needs.
Thank you. Your thoughts, Senator Walker?
Yeah, Treasurer Kelly Mitchell and her staff reached out to me the other day, and we talked about the mechanisms for this. So I'll just deal with the mechanics just a little bit because it's kind of fresh to me. Talking about the, they don't have a lot of lead time. She was a little concerned about getting that prepared, but there is a dashboard app, I think it is, that's called Class Wallet, that is being used in other states that have similar programs. And it's, as Representative Lauer said, there's first an approval process for any vendor. So I said, so if someone needs a speech pathologist or something like that, you'd have to get approval to be a Class Wallet vendor. Then any submitted invoices or appointments, I'm not sure how it's done in terms of future work. Treasurer Mitchell was concerned that there might be some specialized services that require payment in advance, and that could be a problem for some families. So there was discussion about there could be approval of in advance of payment based on a schedule, but otherwise it would be an invoice, and then each of those would be reviewed before they would be forwarded, and it would take 15 days, 10 days possibly. And she was talking about how much personnel it takes to manage this. And it's somewhat labor intensive, I have to admit. They've seen in other states a pretty quick uptake and then a pretty quick leveling off. And Arizona was one that was mentioned that it took about 6 years before the ESA sort of caught on. And then they became rather popular after that introduction. They were using, I think, 26 full-time employees to manage the program in Arizona. And I think Arizona is smaller than Indiana. So mechanically, I think it does have the tight controls. Like I mentioned, I still want to know more about the concerns of disabled students and whether or not they're committed to one program or the other. I don't want to see them hopping from the private sector into the public sector after the count date, et cetera. So I want to learn more about that.
Thank you again, legislators. So let's shift gears and focus on the state's 2-year budget, House Bill 1001. Obviously, the budget's got a lot of parts, but we're going to specifically focus in on 2 of them, CTE funding and EL funding. So let's start with CTE. Overall, the budget in its current form would provide more funding to CTE. However, it would zero out funding for the following CTE programs, or in Columbus, we call them C4, among others: cosmetology, culinary, energy, fashion, graphics, horticulture, interactive media, and radio/TV. BCSC C4 program, which is the largest secondary vocational program in the state, offers 4 advanced certifications and 64 dual credits in multiple programs that might lose funding. Students from 3 different counties travel to C4 to take advantage of our programs. Will you support not cutting the funding of these programs? Why or why not? Representative Lauer, we'll begin with you.
Yes. Thank you for letting people know the status of the CTE funding. And that's one of the debates that we've had throughout the session. And first of all, as you stated, we are increasing funding for CTE programs. And when I looked at what that would mean for Bartholomew County in the first year, so next year it would be a 6.8, so almost 7% increase. And then in 2022 it would be a 6.1% increase. So we are increasing funding in the budget for CTE programs. Now, there were priority shifts in the bill that did, as you say, drop funding for some of those programs that that some believe don't lead to high wage jobs. Now, I'm in the camp, and we're continuing this debate, and I know there's members in the Republican caucus as well that are concerned about losing funding for some of the programs that you mentioned. And it doesn't mean the programs go away, but it does mean that their funding would not be there for each individual student coming in. So each student that takes those classes there's additional funding that comes with the student. And in those particular classes, you mentioned cosmetology, radio and cooking and some service management, that sort of thing. My position is that we should work with our colleagues in the Senate to see if we can't restore some of the funding. I think the sole purpose of our primary education and going into high school doesn't always have to be focused on STEM, even though I'm a strong proponent of STEM fields. And that's where the priority shift went, going more dollars towards math, biology, chemistry, physics, business, and other fields that have, statistically higher wages in the marketplace in a career. But I think part of an education is getting a broad spectrum of skills and a broad education across the board. And I don't want to see these classes cut and not be available to students to broaden their perspective and gain all sorts of different kinds of skills. So I hope the Senate will work to see if we can't do something about that.
Thank you. Senator Walker, again, will you support not cutting the funding for those programs? Why or why not?
Yeah, I will support not cutting those programs. Gene Hack was teaching vocational ed when I was a student in Columbus, and he's already reached out to me and sent me some documentation. I did review not all, but much of the Workforce Cabinet Governor's report from I think it was last December, discussing CTE and the importance in the state. It's just candidly, we've got students that are ready to take the challenges in secondary learning and get an advanced degree. We've got students that are not. And we'd have to be realistic about our expectations of students that want to cook. I've got our youngest daughter. She says from time she was a young person, I'm going to open my own restaurant. I want to open my own restaurant. We said, that's great. That's a lot of work. You know how much work it is to run a restaurant? Well, so now she's exploring a nutrition degree at Purdue University as a freshman. She gets to go to class once in a while, but mostly it's virtual. So she has the aptitude that she can do that. Other students can run the restaurant and they can make a huge success of it. So I will say that I think at this point, it's a budgetary balancing item from the House to reduce funding in some of the less than glamorous educational options. And I don't expect it to stay as crafted as it's written. That's just my expectation.
Well, thank you. Thank you, legislators. We have one more aspect of the budget we'd like to cover. English learner funding. Right now, the state's 2-year budget would zero out all funding for Tier 2 English learners in the state. For those unfamiliar with that designation, in the last budget cycle, the EL funding formula was changed from providing funding on a per pupil basis to providing funding based on tiers. Tier 1 EL students are those with minimal or no proficiency in English. In the education world, we refer to students as level 1 or level 2. Tier 2 EL students are level 3 and 4 students, meaning their English language skills are no longer minimal, but they have not reached native speaker proficiency. Level 1 and 2 students tend to advance to the higher levels relatively quickly, but it becomes much more difficult for them to advance once they are level 3 or 4. 829 students, or 65% of BCSC's EL population, are level 3 or 4. Legislators, could you please speak to these cuts to Tier 2 EL funding? Do you support them? And if so, how will the state support English learners going forward? Senator Walker, you're up first.
Okay, Alan. I think it's the same issue I just mentioned. I think this is a budget balancing technique right now on behalf of the House, and I'm not disparaging them. I just think it's a means by which to find other dollars to move around within the educational spectrum, and I don't see how we can expect a student to be successful. I mean, good grief, some of us born in Indiana are not native language proficient either. So it's important that we be able to communicate if we're going to attain any other higher learning. So I don't foresee that being a hard discussion. I think the difficulty will be in whatever priorities that do remain as the budget. And believe me, when I say budget negotiations, I am dead serious that this is a negotiated item. It is give and take, sometimes down to the last days on line by line by line between the two versions, between the House and the Senate. And so I feel fairly confident that this is a foundational need in Indiana for students to be successful, is to have native language proficiency. And I don't foresee this remaining in the Senate version. I haven't scanned for it yet, but I can only imagine that, again, it's about coming up with a number, a target that is, it's a paper target for now. And it's just, is it an item to give? You know, so I get what I want in the Senate by giving something else back to the House. If this is a throwaway for the House to get something they want from the Senate, believe it or not, legislators do stuff like that. I'm just telling you how it is, folks.
Sausage gets made. Thank you, Senator Walker. Representative Lauer, you're up.
Yeah, so I heard your description and on the tiering, and I think what's important is to take a step back, because when you look at the House budget, there is an increase in funding for the non-English speaking program. So there's a 10% increase, which is new dollars of $5 million new dollars for the non-English speaking program. So it may be a matter of perspective. You know, one system of doing things is moving to another program or another way to fund non-English speakers. But my perspective is that, and if you know, when you look in the budget, the funding was increased 10% for non-English speaking needs in our schools, and I do support that. I recognize that we need to get every student to the level of math and English. I'm always very interested in seeing how our kids are doing locally and across the state with math and English and other metrics. And we want to keep improving year after year. And so I think there may be just a different perspective there, but the funding is increasing for non-English speaking programs.
Thank you, Representative Lauer. Now I'd like to talk about something that's near and dear to all retired public employees, but particularly to retired teachers, and that's an investment into the cost of living adjustment for retired public employees. I know that Senator Walker, you helped get a new funding mechanism, I believe, where the legislature is putting some money into the pension, so that down the road, but long way at this point down the road, there could be some COLA money. I wondered what the possibility might be that the budget could increase the amount that's being put into the pension so that COLA could come sooner rather than later. And so Representative Lauer, wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Yes, thank you. It's so important to not only fund education, but also to make sure that we have good retirement benefits for teachers. And that's one of the focuses, as you mentioned, on paying down or paying into additional funds into the teachers retirement fund. So in the House budget this biennium that we passed last Monday is a $32 million of new funding investment into the 1996 Teachers Retirement Fund. So that's going to help with the balance with the fund, and it is fully funded, which, unlike many states around us, we have a balanced budget, and we are not in debt. And in a lot of cases, we're paying off debt because of what I believe is strong fiscal responsibility of our state. So, with regard to the also in addition, we passed an increase, I think, for the first time in a long time for the 13th check. So we actually funded the 13th check not only next year, but in 23 as well in this budget, and with an increase along with that. So I understand the desire to get to COLA, to get to larger increases for what's been, a fixed income for quite a few over the years. And I appreciate the discussion, and I'm happy to be part of that discussion.
Thank you. And I don't know if we defined COLA for people listening. COLA is cost of living adjustment. And I believe the last time teachers got that was 2011, but I could be wrong on that.
2009 is what I remember, but I may be wrong too.
Okay, and keep going because you're next anyway, Senator Walker.
Well, Lynn, this is going to be also a budget negotiation item. The Senate and the House will have to agree on how much funding from the general funds dollars. I think we have to acknowledge with all of this that we still have a lot of flux on what the federal government is doing in terms of direct funding. I'm getting that glare now. Direct funding and to schools, what that does in terms of total budgets. We've got to also keep in mind that by creating the supplemental investment accounts, it serves several things. I've always believed it is my first duty to the pensions is to make sure they're actuarially sound, so that the future benefits that are already guaranteed, locked in, are not in jeopardy. There's over $1 trillion in public retirement debt in the nation, and some of these on paper are terrible investments. Indiana is not in that case, but we are still $30+ billion short of being actuarially funded to cover all of the future obligations. And we're on track to make that up in the next 15 to 18 years. We keep modifying that number, but the long and short of it is anytime we take dollars out of the current fund balances to pay unscheduled benefits, it affects that actuarially funding number and it brings it down. So by creating the supplementary accounts, we missed an opportunity. It was negotiations with the governor to free up some other dollars to move directly to the retirement supplement accounts to fully fund any future benefit we create. So if it's a cost of living allowance, that has to be baked in for all future payments. If it's a 13 check, that has to be baked in for 2 years, but we have to have the money in hand so that we can allocate in hand so that we can allocate those dollars over the next 2 years or the next infinite years if you cook in a percentage increase. And again, with actuary studies, you know that number before you start. So we've got to make sure we use that right funding mechanism, or we break the model that the IRS said gives you the quality of retirement plan that we're looking for. And so it's going to have to be a budget negotiation. I don't think this bill will even go through pensions. I think it's going to go straight to appropriations to have those conversations.
Thank you, Senator Walker. For our last pre-selected question, we're going to focus on something very important to current teachers, collective bargaining rights. In 2011, the state opted to drastically limit the collective bargaining rights of teachers, changing the law such that only wages and wage-related benefits can be bargained. Do you support allowing local schools, districts, and teachers unions to bargain other topics upon mutual agreement? Why or why not? We're going to start with Senator Walker.
Yeah, on that change in 2011, did not anticipate workplace conditions in the way that we think about it today. I'm open to talking about what that looks like in terms of COVID preparedness, the safety of all workers, school students, everyone. I would like to think that Indiana policy wouldn't put anyone in danger or risk of the children. And if it's a safe environment for the children, it should be a safe environment for the adults in the room as well. And a pandemic kind of changes that perspective a little bit, doesn't it? Because the risk factors to young people are modest compared to that of older folks in the same context. So it's not the same risk. And I would never have imagined that as being a true consideration. I know that's weighing on a lot of teachers' minds currently. There's even, I mean, we can get into the vaccine and sort of the waste avoidance protocol list and whether that's been treated right or not. That's kind of a separate discussion we might get into. But I think in light of that, I would be open to, are there items such as workplace conditions that could be bargainable? The only problem there is if we talk about a pandemic, we'd have to bargain based upon a future pandemic. I don't think you can get the contract written and closed during a pandemic. Maybe some schools are in that right now. I'm sure there are some, but I would be open to kind of a change in perspective based upon recent events.
Thank you. Representative Lauer.
Yes, well, my perspective is I think the current compromise, if you will, on the bargaining environment works very well. I think it is important to focus on the benefits and teacher pay, which I do support increasing teacher salaries. But I also look to other states and you know, there is a sentiment from constituents I hear from that are grateful that we're not bargaining on whether to open schools or shut down our schools. I think one of the most important things Indiana has been strong on, and locally, I appreciate very much that our schools are open. And though we've had some periods where we've had to go to e-learning and a hybrid approach as well, I think by and large, parents and citizens appreciate that Indiana schools are open, and we need to continue to have the ability for all our kids to have the option for in-person learning. And you know, is there a direct nexus there? I think if you start going down the road of bargaining in the COVID world as to whether to conditions, and then you make the nexus with the COVID protocols, I think there could be some tension there, and you know, I think that, and I appreciate that our schools are open, and I think our bargaining agreements currently work well. So I don't support a change in that particular piece of it.
Well, thank you, both of you, both Representative Lauer and Senator Walker. Thanks for answering our questions. Before we wrap up our questions, we're going to take a few submitted by viewers and the public. So our first was submitted online by chat prior to the event, and is for Representative Lauer. The ESA bills introduced in the House and Senate allow families to accumulate up to $26,000 of unspent ESA funds to pay for college expenses after the student completes K-12 education. Now, you support school choice. Do you support using state funds to incentivize families pulling their children out of public schools?
Oh, I didn't quite catch the last part, but I think I understood.
Do you want me to repeat? Are you okay?
Yeah, that's. I think I understand the sentiment of the question, and you know, the numbers. I'm not so sure about the. I think you said $26,000. The ESA bill, again, is for students with disabilities, active military families, and foster children. So these kids in very fluid situations many times. And what the bill allows is only a $2,000 carryover year after year, and then after the child is out of school age, that money actually reverts back to the general fund, or back to the school tuition fund, excuse me. So the number of 26,000, I'm not sure where that's coming from exactly. The point of the ESAs is to give flexibility to these kids in fluid situations, to have more options available to them, and especially with students with disabilities, have extra expenses that not every kid has, whether it's assistance, personal assistance, direct services, and examples in a kid with autism. There are some really good programs available and really good therapies available that could now be covered under the ESA program, to not only have the tuition for your child, but also have additional funding available for those specific needs for your child. And the notion that there'll be a big pile of money there is, I don't think, where the bill lies and where it's going to end up.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Lisa and is for Senator Walker. What role do you see education playing in combating racism in our state?
What role? So racism is a combination of our biases, bad information, and groupthink that I think education can address all three of those. When I think about cultural changes within organizations, I'm reminded of the conversations I've had in many processes over the years in the private sector, that when you lay those cultural changes into the integrated organization, all aspects of the organization, from management down to process, down to whatever it is, you don't want to create, well, now we've got this racism module that we hang on the side of everything we do. A topic such as racism should be integrated, and addressing it should be integrated so that it's seamless, so that it's integral to everything regarding education. So if there are opportunities to have math problems that touch on the subject, to have recess time that touches on the subject, or whatever it is, cafeteria, doesn't matter. Those kind of cultural impacts on systemic thinking are best integrated into every aspect of the learning process. So clearly education has an opportunity. Whether that should be a standalone module or not, I would argue you're going to see more cultural reference and significance if it's integrated into everything that happens in the school.
Thank you. Our last question is from the public and is for Representative Lauer. It comes from an anonymous online attendee. Systems of school choice allow for restrictions in enrollment, and schools in the free market are less likely to enroll students with special needs, limited English, LGBTQ+ status, and students from particular racial backgrounds. Have you looked and studied into how school choice can lead to an increase in segregation?
The answer is yes. I have looked very closely at the academic studies out there on this particular topic, and the research and the academics that have studied this found almost unanimously that school choice improves the integration of a community, that it actually it has a positive effect on bringing people together from different backgrounds and cultures, and actually moves the ball forward. So I think the premise of the question, and it is a question, I understand that, but the studies that are out there actually have shown that when a school choice is available to a community, or at the state level, that actually all schools improve. And this is across a lot of different, not only academically, but also in terms of integrating people of different backgrounds and different faiths and different ethnicities, and that's a good thing. I mean, we shouldn't be looking to do anything that would tear apart or divide a community. And education is the #1 equalizer for every student and every adult. Our Indiana Constitution actually very strongly provides that all Hoosiers should have the ability for an education. And I strongly support that. And with regard to eligibility, I think here in Bartholomew County, and I've asked our private schools, and I've talked to our public schools as well, and I don't see there's any barriers for students from different backgrounds and various abilities, and students with disabilities as well. That I don't see discrimination from our private schools. And in fact, the studies show that when school choice is available, that actually helps public and private schools to lift all boats. And I think that's a good thing. I support that.
Thank you, legislators. Before we wrap up, we'd like to give each legislator a couple of minutes to give their final thoughts on education during this legislative session. We'll start with Representative Lauer.
Well, I really appreciate the offer to meet today. I have to reemphasize that I'm very appreciative and grateful to all of our teachers and school staff, that this has been a most unusual, probably the most challenging year you've had. And I want to thank you for working very hard to keep our students safe, to keep our teachers safe. And I hope that today, my message that you can support school choice and support public education. And I firmly believe that that we are doing that in our House bill. As I mentioned, $600 million new dollars for public education, and with an expansion of school choice as well. So I believe that Indiana is leading on education and will continue to improve, and we have to keep looking to improve. We didn't get to all the bills out there. One of the ones I thought was very good that I've heard from our public schools is if a kid graduates early, you lose the funding for that last semester in high school. So we fixed that. So if we want to reward kids that work hard and graduate early, but not hurt our public schools when that happens. So that's something that's going on. Also, the hold harmless. We are drastically changing the measures for schools. So we're actually moving away from the A to F blanket measures, and we're going towards a direction that's more flexible to the strengths of schools, and really to give parents and people that are thinking about, and businesses thinking about moving to Indiana, the number one thing that people, that companies and businesses and families look at when they're thinking about moving is, what are the schools like? And I'm so grateful in Bartholomew County that we have good quality schools. Our parents are, by and large, mostly picking, all of our parents are mostly picking public schools here. And that's a testament to the strength of our education, and we want to keep improving. But that's important, that every child gets the quality education that they deserve. And I support that, and will continue supporting that. So thank you for having me today. Thank you, Greg, for being here today too. And I look forward to working with you and your colleagues to keep moving the ball forward on education. It's so important.
Thank you. And now, Senator Walker, your final thoughts.
Thank you, Alan. I appreciate Representative Lauer's comments. I want to say that also in regards to any kind of data or studies on integration, or I should say diversity within the private sector schools, the data I have seen supports that it's good for diversity. And I acknowledge that there are students that are more expensive to teach than others. And again, we still need to focus on those cases and make sure that we've got the right balance. Professor Hicks did an article the other day that I'm sure many on the call would like to read. He was critical of Indiana funding of education. And he described how we are falling behind many other states in terms of the increases over the past decade. And I'll concur in part and disagree in part, but I want to make a couple points from Senator Hicks' article. He's right. Everything that we do in public education affects the readiness of the workforce. And the number one complaint or issue we hear from employers across the state is there aren't enough qualified people to do the jobs we could bring to Indiana today already. And so how long does it take to skill up the workforce? Those second graders are not ready to work for a few years yet. So we've got a long-term sustainable issue to address. Professor Hicks' point in the article was he said, rather than, to paraphrase, so many lucrative recruitment packages for big businesses to bring a lot of employees to our state, if we use some of those dollars for education, we would have a work-ready workforce and we wouldn't be bribing companies to come to Indiana. Now, I will say too that a quality education is so important. Creating, it is not the highest goal of public education to create a work-ready workforce. That is not the highest best goal of education, but it is one of the results of a quality education, is that's naturally going to occur. But if our focus is on job creation and skilling for the workforce, it kind of reminds me of some of those old black and white movies where everyone marches back and forth to the factory and you see a very regimented approach to the people of Indiana. When we are creative people, we don't want to destroy the love of learning by overemphasizing workforce readiness. So we got to strike that balance. But I think if we stood back and really looked at our commitment to education, we would understand we wouldn't be scrambling to pay companies to come here so much if we had people that were eager to live and play and work and learn in Indiana. And so I hope that message, I hope other legislators read Professor Hicks' article. It was just a couple of days ago. And I encourage you all to read it and use that as a tool when conversing with your legislators.
Okay. Well, thank you again to both of our legislators for being here today. We appreciate you taking time to talk to education, to speak about education, and taking time on a Saturday when teachers could be with us because, you know, usually on Monday morning, teachers are in the classroom, so they can't be at the chambers third house. So legislatures, for those of you who don't know, have been on a little bit of a break. So they go back from their mid-session recess on Monday, right? You're back in
Yep.
session.
Right.
So we encourage everyone to pay attention to the bills and what happens when they go back on Monday. And we asked our legislatures to keep our public schools in front of your minds and everything that we've talked about today. And everyone have a great day and get outside. It looks like maybe it'll be a nice Saturday. And thanks for attending.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you
I
all.
really appreciate being here today. Thank you.
It's good fun for a Saturday morning.
Yeah.